the shows we've had on for the last probably 8-10 weeks. So if you miss some that you want to see, you just hit the button and it'll come up for you. But anyway, I want to talk to you about some things that have come up very recently. You know, the last couple of years, the Flint school system has been different degrees of turmoil. The latest being the embarrassment former superintendent Leonard Moulton brought to the district when he was named school superintendent. You remember that? He exaggerated his educational credentials. He said he had a PhD. He didn't. Said he had 2 master's degrees. He only had 1. You know, all this in itself should have been a red flag to the school board, but they just blew it off. Now, since that time, after becoming superintendent, he hired an alleged sex offender by the name of Julius Anthony. You remember that? It says, Anthony, let's see if I can find it here. Anthony abused boy 3 in 1996. So, you know, this guy is hired. And there was a lot of talk about whether or not Moulton, who was his business partner, really knew of these allegations and this situation with Anthony in Atlanta, Georgia, where he was charged with sexually abusing a 3-year-old child. Well, anyway, that was a bad situation, and it really kind of got worse as time went on. And then Anthony was charged with a crime for failing to register as a sex offender here in Michigan when he came here to work with Moulton in the Flint school system. And then gave him the second top job in the system when he hired him. So he was in a very good position, making $110,000, $115,000 a year, and working with kids. And then Moulton had some problems in the school district in New York, where he had come from, where Flint had hired him. And it says, New York, this is the journal story of May 5th, 06, and it says, New York audit probes Moulton payments. And it says here, auditors in the Flint superintendent, Moulton, while the Moulton former school district of New York has questioned whether he fully reimbursed the district for personal expenses, was overpaid for moving expenses, and received a correct salary in 2004-2005. Among other things, it says, errors apparently were made in calculating his salary, and they were calculated in such a way that they gave him more than he should get. Obviously, when you're calculating it, rarely does it come out where you owe them money. And also, they could not find proof that he totally reimbursed the Fallsburg district, that's in New York, where he was superintendent before he came to Flint. It says they couldn't find any proof that he totally reimbursed the Fallsburg district for personal expenses charged to the district, provided credit cards. So you've got a credit card problem there in Fallsburg. And then it goes on to say, another concern cited by the audit finding was thousands of dollars in extra payments to Gateway Learning Incorporated, for which the auditors couldn't find the contract. Gateway is run by Julius B. Anthony, now a consultant to Moulton and Flint, and previously consultant in Fallsburg. That was apparently their company together. I don't know whether he was part of that company at this time, but he's giving Anthony these contracts. So there's all kinds of questions that was being raised by the auditors. Now, the Flint board apparently either didn't care if this was happening, or when they looked at it, they thought it wasn't serious enough. But here's the same things that he's saying here apparently started here in Flint after he got here. You know, we have like, for example, that one, here's the May 2nd, 2007, just last month. It says here, outgoing school superintendent Leonard Moulton spent thousands of taxpayers' dollars on a district credit card and expense account. But 10 weeks after filing a Freedom of Information request, the Flint Journal still hasn't received receipts of Moulton's spending. Now, sound familiar? That's exactly what the New York people were looking into, was misuse of the school district's credit card in New York. Same thing all over again here. Why wasn't the school board on top of this? And then it says, Moulton says, well, let me go to the paragraph below. Two district officials, Board of Education Treasurer Vera Perry and School Board Attorney Kendall Williams, said the lack of receipts is because Moulton didn't follow instructions to turn in all of his receipts to the district business office. Moulton said no one told him he had to do that until 2 weeks ago. Come on. She and Williams said they reiterated to Moulton in January that he should submit his receipts to the district office. And it says this, documents provided by the district so far show Moulton charged just under $10,000 in his credit card from October 2005 to February 2007. He also had $5,857 in expenses for the 2006 calendar year through $600 per month stipend. Then it goes on here, it says, Moulton acknowledges some of these expenses were related to out-of-state personal trips, but noted that his contract provides for unrestricted use of a car. Now, the effect of this was, you have to say, you know, why was the school board completely indifferent to these particular problems? Or did they just forget to do anything about it? And then, you know, you have this phony $1 million overspending on school books, on the school book budget by Julius Anthony. And then all of a sudden, just before the election, say, oh, it was just an error. We put it in the wrong account. $1 million? Come on. It took them about 2 months to find it. Because the journal brought it out right before the election, in a week or two, 10 days before the election. We found it was just put in the wrong account. Listen, when that new school board comes in July 1st, they're going to do an audit, especially on this book account. You know, with all these different things, you know, one loose end still hanging out there that has caused some disbelief on the public's part is Moulton's denial that he didn't know anything about Anthony's sexual charges in Atlanta. Claiming he didn't know until his fingerprints, Anthony's fingerprints, were sent in, and Anthony's sexual conduct case with this 3-year-old child came up. In an article of January 3rd, 2007, when this Anthony thing broke, I showed the headlines where it says Anthony abused boy 3 years old in 1996. It says this: Anthony came to Flint at the recommendations of the school superintendent, Walter Moulton, Jr., a friend and former colleague of Anthony. Moulton said he didn't know of the sex conviction until the background check revealed it. He claimed he didn't know anything about it. And this was in the Flint Journal's story of January 3rd, 2007. Now, whether Milton did know or didn't know about the allegations made against Anthony, but still hired him as his business partner, or I should say still hired his business partner, he a convicted sex offender. He hired him in New York, and then he hired him in Flint. If he knew, this would put his credibility and responsibleness seriously in question as someone who is a caretaker of our children. Now, we have just come into possession of a video. Just today we got it. That we believe throws some light on the issue and the honesty of Milton in denying to the Flint public of his lack of knowledge of Anthony's alleged sexual misconduct. Now, it's important because he has denied this all along. He knew anything about this. This is important because it goes right to the heart of this issue. Can you believe this guy? But anyway, I want you to look at this video. It's an interview of Mr. Anthony by the Genesee County Sheriff's officer in charge of the investigation into his failure to register as a sex offender in Michigan, which is required by law, and which he was charged with violating. Now watch this tape, because it goes right to the issue of whether Milton knew about his sexual charges and problems in Atlanta, which he denied to the Journal and to everybody that asked him about it, the TV, and ultimately denying it to the public. Can you play that, please?
Established a company together.
Okay. And when was that company established?
After 2000.
Okay. And was it a Los Angeles company?
No. We first got our license in New York.
Okay.
And then I got a license later on in St. Louis. I filed to operate in St. Louis to get that business name.
Was it an LLC?
No.
It was a
corporation.
A partnership. What was the partnership's name?
Milton Anthony and Associates.
So if I went to what county in New York to pull those records?
I think it's Rockland, but it's really Rochester, New York is.
It's the county that oversees Rochester, New York.
Yes.
And there's going to be a partnership agreement of
Milton Anthony and Associates.
And what was the purpose of that partnership? To do what? Consulting?
Yeah.
And that was in how long? How long ago was that? Back in 2000?
2000.
Okay, so for Walter to say that he just met you 36 months ago is not accurate.
Yeah, that is not accurate.
Okay. And then from that consultant, you moved to Missouri to do the same type of thing, a consultant.
I was already in Missouri.
Okay.
When we met, I was already in Missouri. I was the principal at a private school.
Okay.
And then I left that position and became education director of our state's community partnership in St. Louis. And we were still doing consulting during that time. The majority of the consulting we were doing was actually in Rochester.
Okay.
And then I left that position and started doing consulting full-time at Arches.
Okay.
Which was in 2001.
Okay.
And so we started working, we did some consulting with an organization called Hillside Community Action Agency.
Okay.
And we were doing like a Saturday program there. So we did that in New York. And
how long did that take? How long was that program for?
It was like a school semester, maybe 8 or 9 weeks.
Okay, and you guys worked hand in hand?
Yeah, we worked hand in hand.
Okay, did you stay together there?
No, I would travel back and forth from St. Louis.
Okay, so when you went to New York, would you stay with his family?
I would stay with him.
Okay, okay.
He had his own house.
Okay.
And so whenever I went to New York, I just stayed at his place.
Okay.
And then after that, he was called to Fallsburg.
Okay.
In either 02 or 03, I can't remember. And then he asked me to come and work with him in Fallsburg as a consultant to do primarily the same thing that I was doing here in Flint, which is really to help the district create their comprehensive plan,
Okay.
which is required under No Child Left Behind.
Right.
And so the district hired me to do that. And I
In
did-
Fallsburg?
In Fallsburg.
Okay.
And I did that.
For how long?
We were there for about maybe 2.5 years.
And what was his position?
He was the superintendent of schools.
Okay. From there, you came to Flint, right?
And then we came to Flint.
Do you know about Walter's problem when he first came in about his doctorate?
Yes.
All right. He didn't get his doctorate. He didn't have it at that time.
No, he did not.
Okay. But he made reference that he did.
Yeah.
When somebody has a doctorate and they put control, that means that they've already been confirmed and had their doctorate. When in fact, he just got it in June. Did he ever talk to you about that as to why he put that there?
No, he said that Lisa had made a mistake on the online application.
Okay.
And that was it.
So he just didn't take responsibility, most likely right now?
Yeah.
Okay. When was the first time that you had told him about what happened in Atlanta?
I remember the day. I don't remember the date, but I remember when I did. We were actually doing our Saturday program at Hillside. And at that time, Walter was having some problems with Lisa.
Okay.
And there's some infidelity going on.
On his side or whose side?
On his side.
Okay.
And we were just talking about the challenges that we have as black men and as black educators. And then I just told him what had happened in Atlanta.
Okay.
Because I felt compelled to, we were friends.
Right.
And we were becoming really close. And I felt like that was just something important. If you have a friend like that, you have a business partner like that,
Right.
you want to be as honest as possible.
Can you narrow down the year, maybe the time of the year that happened?
We were at Hillside. Maybe it was either the fall of 01 or the spring of 02.
Okay.
I can't.
Was anybody else there that you talked to about this?
No, Walter was the only person I told.
Okay.
In terms of New York.
Right.
The other people I told were people in St. Louis, like my family and friends in
Right.
St. Louis.
Okay. How many other people in Flint of the school board knew about this?
Nobody,
Okay.
other than Walter.
Okay. Did he tell anybody? Did he ever tell you that he told anybody?
He never told me that he told anyone.
Okay. And what did you tell him exactly? That you were still kind of in this mess?
No. I told him that I had been accused of doing some inappropriate behavior with a child.
Okay.
And that I told him what it felt like going through that process.
Right.
You know, and I felt suicidal during the whole period.
Right.
And then God brought me out. It was a religious kind of
Yeah, it was a reform in your life, right?
Right. That was basically it.
Okay. So, again, for him to be shocked that he even knew about this.
No, he knew about it. He knew what I knew. You know, and
He told all the details.
I told him all the details about how.
Well, anyway, it would appear from what Anthony says that Milton was aware of his conviction because he discussed it with him in the fall of 2001 or the spring of 2002. That was before he went to the New York district, and obviously before he came to Flint. It would appear that Milton was aware of these charges when he denied knowing them to the public here in Flint. He knew, apparently, according to Anthony, that he had been charged as a sex offender. And, you know, thank goodness this guy's gone someplace else. Who knows, he may bring Anthony there since through some legal hanky-panky in Atlanta, Anthony and his friends and his attorneys got these charges dismissed after 10 years. Now, the people you saw sitting in there in the sheriff's department were his attorneys. He had them under 2 or 3 attorneys with him on this occasion. So, it would seem, and remember this too, this fella Anthony failed a lie detector test on whether he sexually assaulted this 3-year-old child. In my opinion, Anthony has all the earmarks of a pedophile. And unfortunately, we'll probably be hearing about him again in the future. You know, these people, the pedophiles, with this type of sexual proclivity, will never stop. They're preying on children wherever they find them. It's just good we got him out of here, and we'll go on from here. But you know, in conjunction with this story, I think what's important is this. You know, this past week, the Flint School District came together to decide on a salary for their new acting superintendent, Linda Thompson. They offered her a salary of $139,000, about $14,000 less than Milton was making before he ran out on the job and his contract here. After less than 2 years, Ms. Thompson was obviously taken back when she was offered a salary of less than what they hired Milton for. You know, here's a guy that's a total stranger of the Flint system. Now, Thompson, the first woman to be offered this job, the first African-American woman. You know, Thompson has been working in the Flint district in various positions, in many supervisory positions for many years, and is very familiar with the district, its personnel, an advantage Milton lacked when he began as superintendent here in 2005 at $153,000. And then he had a cloud hanging over his head from the New York district when he was recruited. And I showed you the auditors questioning his misuse of public funds from this district. Listen, let's look at this Milton quickly again. No PhD, only one master's degree, even though his resume and his says he had 2 masters and a PhD. He runs out in this contract obligation. We're still paying this guy for some reason as a consultant. You know, what do we need him as a consultant for? He screwed that up too with school return plan. The journal says it was a clumsy execution. He hired a man with a record for sexual crime to be number 2 guy in the district. He misuses the district credit card to travel around the Midwest and outside the state on personal matters, likely to Springfield when he was looking for the other job. And then he left Flint for the new job while owing thousands of dollars and property taxes to the city and the county. We mentioned these things last week. I think they're 205, 206. Then he overspends $1 million in the school book fund that they say, oh, it was just now a technical error. They put it in the wrong account. I don't believe that. I just don't believe that. There's something more to this. And as I say, that new board coming in July 1st should look into that. Now, on the other hand, when Ms. Thompson was being considered for acting Flint school superintendent in the Flint system, it was determined her resume was accurate. She was eminently familiar with the system, had a good reputation among her peers. Her leadership while in charge of special education programs and other programs she had was considered exemplary. You know, she's never hired a pedophile in any of the supervisory jobs that we know of. She never has misused the school district credit cards. Her department budgets over the years have always been balanced. Her property taxes are paid, as far as we can tell. You know, it would appear such a superintendent as Ms. Thompson would kind of be a breath of fresh air after Milton. And, you know, and a model citizen that our children would be honored to emulate. So the question is, after considering her credentials and her predecessors and how they work in the system, why shouldn't she get the same pay as the guy they did hire, whose veracity, his ability, his clumsy execution of the school reform plan, they're all in question when they hired him. Or shortly after he came here. They even gave him a bonus. The going rate is what they paid Milton. All she's asking for is the going rate. You know, there's no logical reason why she shouldn't be paid as much as her less than adequate predecessor. You know, the great tragedy is you could lose someone who probably could do a very good job. You know, when they brought Mr. Rutherford from the Beecher School District to be in for acting superintendent, between Superintendent Chow and when they brought Milton in, they paid him the prevailing rate, the going rate. And all she's asking for is the going rate. I don't blame her for being insulted by the board's original offer. It's the principal, and she apparently is a very principled person. You know, could it be kind of a chauvinistic response to a clearly qualified African-American woman because she is a woman? You know, this board ought to be ashamed of himself. When they give a man who had this history that Milton had, the going rate of $153,000 plus a bonus that they offered him later on, and offer this woman substantially less, someone who has qualifications way and above what he had. And we mentioned his lack of qualifications and her qualifications. So, you know, it seems to me that, in all fairness, they ought to pay her what they were paying Milton, because that's the going rate, apparently, for someone in that position in the size of the district. They can, they have those measurements for that. Plus, she's experienced. She knows the system. She's well-liked. I hope they hire her, and I hope she is paid what she's entitled to, because I don't think she'll stay if she isn't paid. We have a tape that we want to play on that. Could you play that tape for me, please?
From the Sarvis Conference Center with details. Spacey?
Bill, tonight Interim Superintendent Linda Thompson said that if the job does not come with the salary that she's asking for, she is not willing to accept the position. Now, it appears both sides are willing to compromise, but the board has not even offered Thompson this position on a permanent basis. School Board President Stephanie Martin says she's had intense talks with Thompson over the past several days. After speaking with other board members, Martin offered Thompson a salary of $135,000 a year, plus an additional $4,500 bonus. But Thompson apparently told Rob Martin she would feel comfortable making what Dr. Milton made, which was roughly $150,000 a year. And tonight, Thompson explained further, saying, "I am asking for the superintendent's salary because you are getting two positions for one. I want to make sure I'm compensated." Thompson is currently filling her previous role as Executive Director of School Transition as well as that of Interim Superintendent. Rob Martin explained the difference in salary stemmed from Dr. Milton's previous experience. Tonight, Thompson was asked to reconsider her position on the matter so that negotiations could continue.
We're going to go back to the drawing board and see what we can come up with. We felt that the amount that the district came forward with was a good figure. However, it has to be something that's good on both sides for both parties. And apparently, we weren't all the way there, but I know that we can work towards some type of conclusion where everyone will be pleased.
And the board is expected to discuss that search for a permanent superintendent, but they decided to delay those talks until June 6th school board meeting. Reporting live from Flint, I'm BC O'Leary, ABC 12 News.
Well, there's the headline in the Journal just this week, Flint pick for school boss wants more cash. That's a little unfair to her, looking like she's kind of greedy. She just wants the same as the guy got. Women are tired of being second-class citizens when it comes to salaries and jobs. And then the unfortunate part is Stephanie Rob Martin, who is president of the Board of Education, had these remarks. Rob Martin said that the board's offer was based on Thompson's experience. What does that mean? This woman's got more experience than anybody could get for that district. She's been in it. She went to school in Flint, grade school, high school. She's all Flint. Knows the system, knows the people, well liked in the district. But anyway, this Martin says that the board's offer is based on Thompson's experience. If they ought to pay her more than $153,000. And then she talked about the difficult financial times faced by the district. They had the same financial problems when Milton was brought in here, which indicates to me, again, it could be a chauvinistic situation here. And then she says Milton had previous superintendent experience, and Thompson does not. Can you believe that? With his background, they think that that's good experience? Come on. It just is not fair. The woman would make an outstanding superintendent, I'm sure, in my mind, and in a lot of other people's minds we've talked to. Well, we'll see what happens here in the next few days, but it seemed to me that they ought to be looking after their own, which is our own, which is our front people who can do the job. We don't have to go to New York or to Texas or someplace else to bring a superintendent there. We got somebody that can do the job now. Let me talk to you about another matter here. Let's look at the tragedy that occurred in Mundy Township this past week when a 3-year-old child was shot in the head and died. At this time, law enforcement officials are still sorting out the details and are very closed-mouthed about who the shooter was. Was it intentional or unintentional? And what the circumstances were that resulted in the child's death. I mean, could the child have inadvertently shot himself? They're looking at that. Play that tape, would you please?
Was suspicious, but tonight there's no final word on who fired the deadly shot that killed a 3-year-old boy. Good evening, everyone. I'm Taryn Asher. Angie is off tonight.
And I'm Bill Hales. Well, any information tonight, though, it all unfolded Thursday afternoon at the family home on Brewer Road in Genesee County's Mundy Township. ABC 12's Josh Devine broke the story on ABC12.com for us. He's back tonight with new details in our top story at 6. Josh?
Sergeant said, quote, extenuating circumstances could, and he emphasized could mean this is all more than an accident. That is perhaps the biggest question investigators here at the Mundy Township Police Department are still trying to answer tonight when it comes to the death of 3-year-old Nicholas Herrick. The whole thing, as he said, happened right around lunchtime on Thursday. Police found the 3-year-old boy with a single gunshot wound to his head. Today, a medical examiner confirmed that the cause of death, but he asked investigators in Mundy Township to double-check certain details as he tries to determine how someone inflicted the gunshot. The boy died Thursday afternoon at Hurley Medical Center. Inside his home, police found 3 other guns. They won't say if those were loaded. They also won't say who, if anyone in the home at the time of the shooting, had gunshot residue on their hands, and that could pinpoint who fired the shot. The medical examiner looked at that part of the case during his autopsy. He was able to determine where the bullet entered and at from which angle.
That would either support or reject what the people are saying about how the gun was fired and where it entered. And it would tell the police if it entered at a certain angle, maybe a person wasn't in a position to do that. And then it would say, maybe we've got to look someplace else.
A firearms expert from Michigan State Police will take a close look at the gun from the deadly shooting. That work should be finished early next week. The department has been in contact with the Genesee County Prosecutor's Office. There's no word when nor if he'll file charges in connection with the deadly shooting. For now, the couple's 2 other children are staying with other family members, and that's at the request of the Department of Human Services. For now, reporting live in Genesee County's Mundy Township, Josh Devine, ABC 12 News.
Now, I think that what you have to look at here is all the various angles on this thing. It's a very unusual case. There's been all kinds of suggestions on how it might have happened, but there are certain things you can rule out. First, the suggestion that the child shot himself. The police feel it's kind of unlikely that a 3-year-old could put that much force and pressure on the trigger of the gun so that it would fire. But you never can tell. They're looking at that now. See how many pounds of pressure has to be used to pull the trigger. This was it's a 3-year-old child. And they have concluded, apparently, that there was no gunshot residue on the child's hand. So it's unlikely it was him, although there is some suggestion by some people who are familiar with the case that that might have happened. But all the physical evidence would rule that out. And I think that they're looking very closely at the mother. You can't ignore that. She and a 5-year-old daughter were the only ones in the house. If the little boy didn't carelessly fire the gun himself that caused his death, there's a 5-year-old daughter in there. Police believe if she had inadvertently shot her brother by carelessly handling the gun, she would have said something, that she was sorry, she didn't mean to do it, but she didn't say anything like that. So the only one you have left is the mother. And the mother is being very obtrusive when it comes to exactly what happened here. They're very suspicious of the mother. But they haven't concluded that she's the responsible person. But they've ruled out the boy because he had no residue on his hands, and they don't believe the daughter did, because her reaction to the situation is different. So the father has to apparently be ruled out. He wasn't even home. So, it comes back to the mother. Now, Now again, they may conclude the child could have pulled the trigger and wasn't any residue on the hand, maybe for other reasons, or the little girl may have pulled the trigger, may have carelessly been using the gun in a careless manner and causing the child to be shot in the head, her brother. All of those are possibilities. But the one that is most possible, as far as the police are concerned, and the one they're looking at, is whether the mother was involved in it, either intentionally or unintentionally. Now, one of the other things that the police get very suspicious of is that she's immediately gone out and hired an attorney to represent her, and they ask why, if you have nothing to do with it. Keep in mind, she has a right to do it, and maybe she needs an attorney because there's possible crimes here. But such a move makes the police suspicious. There's at least 3 crimes that I can think of would be here. One is if someone did it intentionally, like the mother. And keep in mind, they're checking the guns now. And I don't know whether they took samples of the mother's hands. They may have done that. But whether they took it of the clothes, without a search warrant, I don't know. We're trying to find that out. But there's 3 possible crimes: the intentional shooting, that'd be obviously first-degree murder; negligent handling of a firearm by her that causes the death of the little boy, which would probably be a manslaughter charge; negligent use of a firearm in that way; or having a gun available if it's the child that pulled the trigger and the little boy shot himself, not intentionally, of course, but shot himself because he was carelessly handling the gun. That's a crime that a parent could face because the gun was available for the child to use, or even the little girl to use. So you've got these crimes that you have to be considering when you're looking at this case. Now, I'm a little critical of the police investigation here. Now, the story says that they interrogated the woman at her home on her porch for an hour or 2. They were talking to her. Now, as a prosecutor, you want to get a suspect, and she certainly was a suspect at this time to be involved in one of these possible 3 crimes, even if she didn't do the shooting. She has to be considered a suspect. You don't let them stay in their own environment. You put them in the car, you take them downtown, sit them in an interrogation room, and talk to them, because if you're going to find anything out, it'll be a few moments after the crime is committed where you've got them in a neutral situation. Keeping a potential violator of the law in a comfortable environment is not in the best interest of getting to the truth of the matter. And that's what you have to do. And police are entitled to bring somebody in to talk to them. If they won't go in, they can make an arrest without a warrant, and they can hold them 72 hours, I think it's 72 hours, without a warrant while the investigation is proceeding. Now, if she wants an attorney during that time, she's entitled to the attorney. The attorney comes in and says, don't say anything for the next 72 hours. We'll see if they get a warrant. If they get a warrant, we'll deal with that then. So we have all these counter movements and other movements back and forth. But it would seem to me that the police should have taken her out of the environment, should have sought a search warrant, and maybe they did, but it was, I think, a little late. Should have gone in the house, looked for the paraffin things from the gun, the powder from the gun, on the hands of the woman and on her clothes and any clothes in the house because she may have changed the clothes. So all of these, all these things should have been looked into. And I don't know how closely they did. All I know is they kept her there a long time and should have taken her downtown because that may have been the difference of her telling the police really what happened and the fact that she didn't tell them. They let her walk away. And she may know a lot more than she's saying. And who knows, maybe the little girl did the shooting and she's trying to protect her. But the fact of the matter is, they had an obligation to look into this matter very closely, do all the things according to the rule book, the paraffin test, the search warrant, taking the person out of that environment to a place where you can question them legitimately. No, that's not suggesting that you put them on the rack or you do the drowning technique that the U.S. Army is accused of doing with Muslim captives, but you can talk to them and you have a much better chance of finding out the truth under those circumstances. Well, the bottom line is this child obviously didn't have to die. And that's a terrible tragedy, however it was. Negligence, carelessness, intentional, whatever, the child is gone. Very unfortunate. Well, anyway, let me talk to you about another matter that's come up here. I noticed this week, I thought was kind of interesting. There's kind of a battle going on down in the county county commission offices regarding who should do the new roofing for the county building, the administration building. The county commissioners, I think it was like 7-2 or 6-3, voted to have the building trade union people get the job. They were given a preference for the construction job of putting the roof on, and I think other jobs too that may be coming up. Now, over a year ago, this matter came up once before, and it says county contracts getting best deal for public should be part of the discussion. And it says gleaming from debate coming out of the Genesee County Administration Building over whether to hire the union contractors for big jobs or increase opportunities for minorities. One hears only silence on a most relevant topic. Who can do the work best for a reasonable price? That's what they're saying. And then it goes on to say, the people who want the unions to come in versus the people who want minority contractors to be given the job, and says both have worthwhile arguments, and they favor going to what is fairest to all concerned and best for the local economy. But just once, why can't discussion start out with a focus on the quality and the cost? That was in March 2006, over a year ago. And that was an editorial. Now, here's what's happened. I'm sure when the commissioners were giving consideration on who should do the job, fresh in their mind, at least of the majority of these county commissioners, was the fiasco that emerged in the city of Flushing with a non-union low bidder ripping off the city of Flushing a couple of years ago when they were building the municipal center. You remember that? You might recall the contractor ran out on the job before it was completed, costing the city and its insurance company hundreds of thousands of dollars extra and over-budget costs. And then besides the near year delay in completing the job. It obviously was a major inconvenience for the city of Flushing and officials who are going to use the building for public business and public purposes, like the district court, which was a year behind. The bottom line here is the city of Flushing went out and hired the building trades union people to finish the job. Also, even some of the original work done by the non-union low bidder had to be redone by the building trade people because it was below specs. Now, I'm sure the county commission who hired the building trade union knew the job would be done right and it would be on schedule, and that's why they hired them. They know that the quality of their work. The Journal Editorial Department, I think, speaks with kind of a forked tongue on the subject. Let's look at the most recent editorial, which was on this subject, which was June 1st, just this week. Here's what this editorial says. The headline is Union Preference. County Board ignores future with contracting favoritism. It says shunning non-union companies when doling out government contracts not only limits opportunity, but it reinforces Genesee County's image as a place not ready for the 21st century business. Communities in global economy must be hospitable to capital, which means removing roadblocks to employers, not building them. Of course, the latter is precisely what the County Board of Commissioners did when it voted for a deal with the local Building Trades Council that guarantees only union companies would be hired to replace the county administration building roof. Ostensibly, the county gets something in return, assurance of no work stoppage or other delays in the project, like out in Flushing. But this arrangement amounts to a little more than a shakedown by a favored group. Now, I don't understand that reasoning. But it goes on to say it certainly doesn't assure taxpayers that the work will be done better or cheaper than their estimated $300,000 price. It also doesn't help the minority and other small construction firms get a fair shot at the business, which is, that's a fair criticism. Such thinking might be heresy in what many still consider a union town, but that term itself is becoming less and less relevant in Flint here today. Yeah, that's kind of a cheap shot. But keep in mind, the Flint Journal doesn't have a real positive impression or attitude about unions. They have fought the union organization, their paper down there, tooth and nails every time it came out. This is kind of an anti-union. Why would they just be so? A year before, they're talking about give us the best price and the best in workmanship, and that's what we should be looking for. But now they say that's not important, apparently. At the same time, and the second issue here is, while the freezing out of minority contractors and subcontractors is wrong, I think the criticism for the wrongdoing rests not with the county commission, because I think they were trying to make sure they got the best work done, and they thought that price was the best price they could get, and make sure that it was done on time and that it would be guaranteed. It wasn't the commissioners, it's the unions themselves. Most of their members are licensed by the state within their specialty, and invariably guarantee and provide quality work. So when you hire the union guys, you're probably going to be all right. See, I think the pressure should be put on the unions to employ more minority contractors. And if it takes training, see that they're trained. and see that they are licensed by the state. And to get licensed, you have to be properly trained. Unions should be doing that. They shouldn't let these minority people out there floating around by themselves, because they may never get licensed under those circumstances, because they don't get the jobs, they don't get the experience, so that they can be licensed. You know, at the present, while some building trade unions are quickly running in this direction to get more minorities, the pace is obviously impeded by even racist restrictions, official or unofficial, hidden or unhidden. They're there. This attitude in this day is unacceptable. Every qualified citizen, no matter what their color, should be able to bid on government contracts where the results are guaranteed. All I'm saying is the specialty licensing by the state will not foolproof give some assurance that the job will be done right and on schedule. So I can see why the county commission decided to go with the building trades, because they guarantee their work, they're licensed, and they get the job done. I say African American contractors and subcontractors, or any minority contractors, can do the same if given the opportunity. And part of the opportunity is these building trade businesses hire minorities, get them trained, get them licensed if they're not trained and licensed now. And there are many that are, and they could be hired. But what we got to do is we got to do more to get more of our people, black, Latino, whatever it may be, up to snuff on being able to do that job. And they can do it if you just give them the opportunity to get the experience and get them licensed so they can bid on these contracts and be part of the system. Well, anyway, I want to get to a couple of other subjects, but I'm running late. This week, I'm not sure if we're going to be on at 11 to 12 tomorrow night, but if we're not, we'll probably try to get a time Friday night or Thursday night on this program for its repeat. But we'll look and see. But in the meantime, we'll see you next week, and we'll be at the White Horse.